money's being used for a bond.
Yes. Yes, that's already been approved. We could ask Matt. We're running?
All right.
Oh, fantastic. All right. We're running. Good evening. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance for Tuesday, January 16th, 2018 to order. Before we begin the meeting, I just had a memo given to me to add something to the agenda. And that item is an item that I guess I should read just what it is. It's the Board of Selectmen took action on an award of a heavy rescue vehicle. Why don't I just put it in the form of a motion, and we'll add it as 8A, if I could do that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. First item on the agenda is receive audit report for fiscal year 2016-2017, which is prepared by Bloom Shapiro. And at this point, I'd like to invite our good friend Nicoletta McTeague and Santo Carta up to talk about the audit with us. Thank you.
Good evening.
And I would assume we're going to get started with this one right here.
So I'll get started with the audit report, the CAFR. There are several reports that we issued, but I guess this one is the bigger one and might take the most time going through. So I'll start. I have a little agenda here in front of me just to keep myself organized. I'll start with engagement scope and standards, required auditor communications, and then the results of the CAFR. And briefly, I'll go through new GASB pronouncements that are going to be implemented in the next fiscal year, or the fiscal year that you are going through right now. I'm not going to go through the whole report page by page. I'm going to emphasize certain areas of the report, but I'll be open to questions at any time. So the CAFR has several parts. It starts with the introductory section, which is the letter of transmittal, followed by certificate of achievement, org chart, and principal officials listing. The introductory section, along with the statistical section located at the end of the report, started on pages 80, 90. Sorry, I have to put my glasses on. 90 through pages 90 through 104. Those are considered informational information. They're not part of audited, so none of this section is subject to the audit. So there are unaudited sections of the audit report. The financial section, starting on page 1, starts with the independent auditor's report. Page 1, so the independent auditor's report is on pages 1 through 3. The report starts with listing out the financial statements that are subject to the audit, which are several opinion units, starting with governmental activities, business type activities, discretely presented component unit, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the town of Guilford of Connecticut. So this was the subject of our audit. Financial statements are responsibility of the management. In addition to financial statement preparation, the management is responsible to design internal control over financial reporting and then implement those internal controls. Our responsibility as auditors is to express an opinion on whether or not these financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. Our opinion is on page 2, and actually it's opinions in plural because each opinion unit has it Each opinion unit has an opinion, and all those items that I listed, governmental activities, business type activities, each major fund, and the remaining governmental funds, each on themselves, they are an opinion unit that we summarize the opinions in this paragraph on top of page 2. So the results of the audit were a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements over all opinion units that we audited. There is a paragraph, second paragraph on page 2, emphasis of matter. It emphasizes the implementation of GASB number 73, accounting and financial reporting for pensions and related assets that are not within the scope of GASB statement 68. That's for the volunteer hire plan, which was not included in the books as a pension plan because it was not subject of GASB 67 and 68 a few years back when GASB 67 and 68 were implemented. So GASB 63 required that pension plans, they do not have a what's called qualified trust fund, should be reported in the financial statement. So this year it's included. The same information as all the other pension plans is included there, with exception that the total liability is equal to net pension liability because there are no assets to be subtracted from the total liability of this pension plan. Our opinion was not modified with respect to this matter because it was just a implementation of a new of a GASB required for the fiscal year. In addition to the basic financial statements, there is a section in the report that is called required supplementary information. Included in that is a management discussion analysis that starts on page 4. And there are several required supplementary information related to pension schedules starting on page 67 through page 75. We do not express an opinion on those required supplementary information, but they are included as required in the report. We apply certain limited procedures to this required supplementary information, such as inquiry of the management, method of preparation, consistency, and other items like that, but we do not express an opinion on the required supplementary information. The next section of the opinion is other information, and that information included in the other information are all the combined and individual non-major fund financial statement and schedules. And we express an opinion in relation to basic financial statements. So we do these financial statements starting on page 76. They are subject to certain additional audit procedures, such as tying out numbers to the basic financial statements and making sure that the same preparation, the same work goes through them as it does for the basic financial statements. So our opinion on these other supplementary schedules is in relation to the basic financial statements. In addition to the report that's bound here, there is another report that's issued as required by government auditing standards, and that is the report of internal control over financial statements, and that's bound together with state and federal single audits as required by state and federal audit standards. So this is the opinion. So with one sentence, everything is clean. The opinion on the basic financial statement is clean. The basic financial statements start on page 14 with the statement of net position. Page 14 and 15, so together statement of net position and statement of activities are called government-wide financial statements, where all the funds, with exception of trust and agency funds, such as pension plan or student activities, are included in here. The governmental activities include all funds such as general fund, special revenue fund, capital project funds. They are all included in one column, and they are accounted for using full accrual basis of accounting. Business type activities include enterprise funds, and the town has 3 enterprise funds, the marina, golf course, and the waste transfer fund. So they are all reported together as one column, and the total makes what's called primary government. The component unit, Guilford Library Association, is reported, is discretely presented in this exhibit 1 and 2. The primary government ended the year with a total net position of $53.2 million, that's shown on page 14, and the change in the net position is reflected on Exhibit 2 or Statement of Activities on page 15. So for the year, the total primary government net position increased by $5.7 million from $47.4 million to $53.2 million in the current year. And that governmental activities increase was $5.8 million, and business type activities decreased slightly by $62,000 for a combined $5.7 million increase. So this Exhibit 2 Statement of Activities starts with expenses by each function of the primary government, and then those expenses are matched with program revenues, which further are reflected as charges for services, operating grants and contribution, and capital grants and contribution. So again, these 2 exhibits are prepared on full accrual basis of accounting, meaning that all long-term assets and long-term liabilities and their changes are reflected in here for all funds of the town, with the exception of the pension trust funds. On page 16, Exhibit 3, we have a balance sheet for all governmental funds. Each column in this exhibit represents a major fund or and further an opinion in the financial statements. General fund ended the year with a total fund balance of $12.6 million, of which about $9.4 million is unassigned. The changes in the fund balance for general fund and all the other governmental funds are shown on page 18, Statement of Revenues, Expenses, and Changes in Fund Balance. And as you can see, the total governmental funds fund balance for the year went up $16 million from a negative of deficit of $19 million to a deficit of $3.2 million. And that increase of $16 million, general fund represents $2 million increase. And the other funds, bonded project funds, a decrease of $2.8 million. High school construction, an increase of $16.9 million. And the non-major governmental funds pretty much stay the same. Included in the $16 million is a result of a bond issuance of about $15.6 million for the year. If we go back on page 17, there is a reconciliation between fund balance, which is a negative of $3.3 million, to the net position for all governmental activities of $51.5 million as presented on Exhibit 1. Then this is just for the governmental activities. And this is to reconcile the 2 methods of accounting that are used in the government-wide financial statement, which is the accrual base of accounting versus the modified accrual accounting that is reported for the governmental funds. The same type of reconciliation exists on page 19, where the change in the fund balance is a positive $16 million, but the change in net position is only $5.8 million, because there are certain changes in the long-term assets or liabilities that they might be reported as revenues in the government fund financial statements, but for accrual basis in government-wide financial statements, they are just reduction of liabilities or change in the accounts receivables. So that's what these reconciling pages are, just to make sure that the numbers make sense from one accounting method to another. The statement that you probably are more familiar with is the budgetary statement on page 20. And then for the year ending June 30th, 2017, total revenue were $1 million higher than the actual, higher than the final budget. And the expenditures were $308,000 lower than the budget. So that the end result was a positive $1.3 million at the end of the year. So fund balance on budgetary basis started the year at about $9.4 million and was an increase of $1.3 million to arrive at budgetary fund balance at year end at $10.7 million. And the budgetary fund balance and GAAP fund balance that we saw in Exhibit 3 and 4 are different because of a different, again, another different method of accounting of the fund balance. While in the budgetary base of accounting, encumbrances are reported as expenditures. In the modified accrual accounting, encumbrances are reported as expenses only when they are invoiced and the goods and services are received. And in addition to that, there are a couple other reconciling items that, if you have further questions, that will be explained on note 2 of the financial statements on page 34, if there are any specific questions for differences. So there is yet another reconciliation between another method of accounting. So far, we've gone through 3 methods of accounting. On page 21, there's a statement of net position for proprietary funds. There are 2 types of proprietary funds: business type activities and internal enterprise funds and internal service funds. So the column for the non-major enterprise funds includes the activities or includes the financial position on page 21 for all 3 combined business type activities. Where further detail for them could be found on page 85 for all 3 funds: waste transfer, marina, and the Gulf course fund. And the internal service fund is used to record the activities of the health insurance, self-insurance fund. Page 22 is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position for the proprietary funds. And as you can see, the total net position at year end for the business type activities was $1.6 million, which is a reduction of about $62,000 from the prior year. And the internal service fund balance increased by $2.1 million to go from $1.4 million to $3.5 million. And on page 23, there's a statement of cash flows for, again, both business type activities and governmental activities internal service fund. Statement of cash flows is split into the results from cash provided or used by operating activities, non-capital financing activities, finance-related activities, and investing activities. So the cash for business type activities was an increase of about $28,000, and internal service fund was about $2 million. And there is a reconciliation between the cash used in operating activities between the 2 methods of preparing the statement of cash flows, the direct and indirect method. On page 24, there's a statement of net position for fiduciary funds. Fiduciary funds, we have 2 types of fiduciary funds: patient trust funds and agency fund, which is the student activity funds. The patient trust fund ended the year with a restricted net position of $58 million, which was an increase of $3.5 million from prior year net position of $54.6 million. And that change in the net position for fiduciary funds, the trust funds, is shown on page 25 or Exhibit 10. So this is kind of long-winded end of the results for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017. So these are the basic financial statements that are followed by the notes to the financial statements. The notes are the section of the basic financial statements where you'll find detailed information about certain material amounts that are reported in all these exhibits that I just went over. The notes to the financial statements are consistent with prior year, and I was not planning on going over them unless there are any specific questions about any notes in the report. And as I mentioned before, there is a section that's called Require Supplementary Information starting on page 67. These are good schedules to go to and find historical information related to pensions for items such as net pension liabilities, so you can see the change over the year, or contribution of the employer to each and every single pension plan that's reported in the town's financial statements. So this is a high-level summary of what I wanted to cover regarding CAFR. You open for questions, or?
That's it? You know,
I can go page by page.
No. Does anybody on the board have any questions? Or every year I'm always amazed by how much material is in here to try to digest. So
it's not an easy report to read.
But it's comprehensive. It's very comprehensive.
I think as a credit to our financial directors and their staff, we should accent this award that they get. Seem to get it almost every year. The Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, presented at Guilford, Town of Guilford, for comprehensive annual fiscal report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2016. So they got an award, I guess, from the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, GFOA. Correct?
Yeah, and that was last year's certificate, but I know it's being submitted for another one. So we'll get this one next year.
Definitely.
So, well done. Well done.
I was also wondering how you do your inflation figures, or any estimates for inflation. If you don't have it, didn't want to put you on the spot, I just was curious.
Maybe the actuary will be the proper party to be asked that question.
I thought I did see something that talked about some of the standards that are used in the inflation and aging and things like that are just basically average
for the actuary
standards for I don't remember. I couldn't tell you what page it was, but I thought I came across it someplace. Yeah, it was more more in the pension area. So
in the notes of the pension plans. Yeah.
Right.
Working with their consultants.
Yeah.
So the audit just audits those.
Okay.
That information
Right.
is the
Came from our pension. Okay, got it.
Okay. Anything else on this on the audit? And I know you want to just touch on the state and the federal.
Quickly, yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
So there are two other bond reports that you received or that the town issued. One is, I'll start with the federal single audit report, and the other one is state single audit report. The federal single audit report in itself includes three reports in there. So if we go to the table of contents, they are listed in there. One is the independent auditor's report on compliance for each major federal program, report on internal control over compliance, a report on the schedule of expenditures for federal awards required by the uniform guidance. So the report itself will have the schedule of expenditures, the notes to the schedule of expenditures, and then the last report, independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standard, is the report that's referenced in the CAF, or the very last paragraph of the opinion. And this is the same report that's bound in the federal single audit report and the state single audit report as required by both standards. So to summarize the result of the federal single audit that we did. I'll point your attention on page 8 where everything is summarized. As far as the type of the auditor report that we issued, as I mentioned before, was unmodified. The report on internal control over financial reporting, we had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we identified as a result of doing our audit report over major programs, and there were no non-compliance material to the financial statements noted. So basically everything is clean, that's clean reporting. I just want to mention that we do not express an opinion on the internal controls over financial reporting. We look at internal controls, we do our testing, but we do not express an opinion on the efficiency of the internal controls. But while we are doing our audit procedures, if we come across any either significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, that will be reported in this report. But we did not identify any of such weaknesses. As far as the federal awards go, the major program that we tested is the special education cluster. That is about $723,000 and reflects about 39% of the total federal assistance received of $1.8 million as shown on page 4. So when we audit the programs, we audit only the ones that are identified as major programs, so which in this case is special education cluster. Each federal program that we test has a series of compliance requirements that we test either for compliance or for the internal control over the compliance. So the results up above here are related to the major program, so we did not have any findings either on compliance or the internal controls over the compliance of this program that we tested. So that's a quick summary of the federal single audit. The state single audit is it's pretty much in the surface looks exactly the same as the federal single audit, but for it we, instead of following the uniform guidance that we follow for the federal single audit, we follow the State Single Audit Act. But the requirements are very similar with some differences. While for the federal single audit we are required to test at least 20% of the federal assistance, for the state single audit we are required to test at least 50% of the state assistance. So if we go kind of on the same page as we did page 9 for the federal single audit, there is a quick summary here. So while for the federal single audit we tested only one program, for the state single audit we tested 3 of them as listed on page 9, Town Aid Road, Local Capital Improvement Program, and the Property Tax Relief for elderly and totally disabled homeowners. So the total of the expenditures we tested was about $625,000 out of $1.1 million non-exempt grants that the town of Guilford got. So if we go back a few pages, the total state assistance was in the middle of the page 5. The total state financial assistance before exempt programs is $1.1 million, and that $1.1 million is subject to audit. And then there are several other programs that fall under the exempt programs section of about $7.8 million for a total of $8.9 million. But subject to the audit is only the first section, the non-exempt program. So we tested at least 50% of the $1.1 million non-exempt program as required by the State Single Audit Act. And again, the same report required by government auditing standard that I mentioned before, the internal control over financial reporting that's bound in the federal single audit is bound in the state single audit as required. So that's another report down. And we should couple smaller reports in addition.
Does anybody have any questions on what's been covered so far? Federal, state?
I guess I have one question. The programs that are exempt, are they exempt because of the size, the dollar amounts, or
No, because the state calls them exempt, so they're not, it's
Okay.
not requiring us to test
just
them.
not requiring audit? I guess the other thing was, how do you decide which programs? But you sort of answered, you have to pick the major ones, and you need to cover a certain percentage.
Correct.
So you just tend to pick the bigger ones?
So
or-
we go through a process that's called risk assessment of all the, we are talking about the non-exempt programs now. So the way, and this is all prescribed by the state single audit, that's how they want us to go by selecting the program. So we risk rate the programs. The programs that are over, in your case, $200,000 and not been tested in the last couple of years, they are considered high risk, so we must test those programs. And then if we have tested all those programs and then we haven't reached the 50% threshold, we risk rate what's called type B programs that are between $25,000 and $200,000. If we have not tested them in the past, or there are new programs, or they have some specific requirements that we think that make the program high risk, then we select those programs for testing. And if there are no such programs, then we are required to just test another program just to reach the 50% requirement. So we go, for both state and federal single audit, we go through risk rating exercise before we decide which programs we are going to test as major every year.
All right, understood, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another report is about 4 pages. It's the required communication of auditors to those charged with governments, which in your case is the Board of Finance. It's a report that starts with qualitative aspects of accounting practices. I'm not going to go over the whole report, just want to emphasize a few things. All the significant account policies are not one of the financial statements, just like I mentioned when I went through the CAFR. The report that we went through includes some estimates that they are listed on page 1 of this report. So net pension liability is an estimated amount. The number could be higher or lower eventually, but that the estimate is reported. Another estimate in the report will be the OPEB obligation. The useful life of governmental activities and business type activities for all the capital assets. It's again an estimate. The allowance for doubtful account is an estimate, and then the incurred but not reported liability that is in the internal service fund, the health insurance fund, is another estimate that went to the financial statements preparation. So those are the management evaluated all the estimates, and we tested them, or we evaluated them, but again, the estimates are estimates, so they are not exact numbers, but we wanted to emphasize what those estimates are in the report. We did not have any difficulties performing our audit or dealing with management. Especially this year, it went very smoothly, I have to say.
Fantastic.
We did not have any disagreements. The management for both the town side and the Board of Education signed a management representation letter where they take responsibility of the financial statements. We are not aware that the management consulted with any other audit firms, and there were no other audit findings or issues that we reported in other reports.
No surprise there.
Yes.
There are 2 smaller reports. One is the report to the superintendent of schools related to agreed upon procedures for educational forms ED01. Again, we are required by the state of Connecticut to perform certain procedures regarding the information the Board of Education submits to the State Department of Education. So this is just for information only.
I don't think
We might need a copy of that one later.
Just the superintendents get this. I just,
Okay. You just
for information.
you read
I
it.
just want-
Okay.
See,
I just want to say that we
Okay.
issue that report.
We don't have that, but it was sent. So Dr. Freeman's aware of it, and Linda's aware of it. Okay, that's good.
I don't have that, so
Okay.
I
The
That's
State
fine.
Department of
That's
Education
fine.
tells us to give it to
You're on record,
superintendents.
so it's all taken care of.
And the very last, unless there are any other questions regarding the reports that I just talked about, is the management letter. So there is only one repeat comment on this letter. I just want to emphasize the fact that this is not significant deficiency or material weakness. It just is our recommendation for improvement or enhancement of your internal controls. The fraud risk assessment comment that's here is not new. It's a repeat comment from prior year. And in discussions with management, I know that there have been inquiries by the management on the way to go by doing the risk, the fraud risk assessment. I can't speak for the management where that inquiry is, but I know for a fact that some discussions have been about what and how to do, which way to go related to the fraud risk assessment. So this is, I'm not going in detail to this finding because it's nothing new for the current
No,
year.
it's not. In fact, several of the members of the board here have seen this comment over the past few years regarding fraud risk assessment. I think that we have in the past felt, it would be a prudent action to take, but we have decided to pass for numerous reasons. The one thing that I think we have in our favor, and one thing I want to make note of is, and I've said this to a couple of board members offline, fraud risk assessment is important. But I think it's also just as important that there's a statement in here that says that there's offered constructive suggestions in modifying and improving accounting controls and administrative practices. That being said, it's not that we're looking for criminals. I think it's looking for where there could be risks and doing a top-down look at our procedures and how things are going. I don't think there's any departments or any speculation that there's anything, but when it keeps appearing as a recommendation in the letters, after a while, you keep getting hit in the head with something, you start thinking maybe we should take it a little bit more into consideration. So I just wanted to put that out there. I know several of us have heard it. I think that maybe I could ask either Mary Jane or Matt to talk a little bit about it, but did you want to say something first?
Yeah, I just had a general question about the degree to which your other clients, other towns in Connecticut, are acting on this fraud assessment, whether they feel that it's essential. How many towns and cities are committed to this process?
I do not have a number for you on how many towns are committed to the process, but towns are at various stages, just like your town has been discussing it for a while and trying to find the most efficient way to do it or which way to go by doing it. There are other towns that are probably going through the same process as you are, but unfortunately I don't have a number for you today.
Who have actually done it?
I know a few that have done it, and not two of them do it the same. Depending on the town and then their own situation, they do it differently. And I believe Mary Jane did a survey of the towns, and she is getting ready some responses that she got. I do not have any. I don't have what she is going to say right now.
Matt, go ahead.
Mike, just a quick clarification. This is only the second year that this fraud risk assessment comment has been in our review. And,
Really?
there was a smart-ass chairman of the board last year who suggested this was the possibility that Bloom Shapiro was looking to increase their billables. But I'm on a different side of the fence now. And again, I think because it's appeared twice in our audit, that we need to take a look at it. Mary Jane and I engaged with the fraud risk assessment team at Bloom Shapiro and had discussions about the applicability, the range of services that they offer within their fraud risk assessments, and it can be just a couple of departments which might cost you $5,000 up to a full risk assessment, which includes both Board of Ed and the town side, which could be in the $30,000 range. We did ask that same question relative to other clients of Bloom Shapiro's who have engaged them for fraud risk assessments. and I believe it was 2 or 3, I think it was 2, that Bloom Shapiro has done. However, Bloom Shapiro, as much as they'd like, doesn't own all of the audits in the state of Connecticut. So Mary Jane did reach out to her GFOA listserv to see whether or not there were others who have done it. I took the opportunity to reach out to another accounting firm who I was familiar with from my previous life and was in a skeptical fashion saying, is this just becoming a standard piece of every audit? And he said yes and no. Yes, from the perspective that in the industry, cybersecurity and fraud risk assessments are the 2 things that most accounting firms are focusing on, and I see some nods over there. An accountant. So that we then got from the Bloom Shapiro team a little further delineation on what a typical assessment might look like, and we are prepared to discuss further with them the applicability and the use here. I took the opportunity at a department level managers meeting last Monday to talk about this, and in much the same fashion as Mike described. This is not a witch hunt. We don't have suspicions on departments, specific departments, but it's really implementing best practices for financial management and control. So that's kind of where we are. Probably more than you want to know, but that's where we are at this point. Mary Jane, anything that I missed?
I just want to add that it's not just financial, as in who's collecting the deposits and putting them in the bank. It's how we manage our equipment, any type of asset that the town owns. So depending on what we choose to do, it would incorporate all of that. We could do as much or as little as we wanted, but it's not just who's collecting dollars and change and getting it to the bank. It's more comprehensive than that.
Is it retroactive at all, or does it look only at controls and procedures that are currently in place?
Currently in place.
So I guess it's obvious that we're not immune to it here in Guilford, right?
No, I did.
Can't assume.
But,
I did reach out to GFOA. All of the cities and towns that responded to me are seeing similar comments in their audits. Some have done RFPs to go out to find a source to do this other than their auditors. Some have gone through that process and then chosen not to do it for whatever reason. Some towns are in the process of thinking about it because they've seen it a couple times like us. Very few, I found 2 that actually had done an actual fraud risk assessment, and a 3rd that did a very high level one just to satisfy their auditor. So I didn't get a lot of input on the fraud risk assessment itself.
I've always been of the. I just remember technology years ago, in our office, and there's always this, fear of being cutting edge and doing things. But when you mentioned the cybersecurity and you mentioned the trends that are going on today, I really thought this appeared 3 or 4 times, but I guess it really hit home this year and last year. But I do think it's something that probably should be. We'll just. It sounds like you're going to be considering more. We've actually looked into it more than we have the last time it was recommended.
I consider the management letter my performance review of some sort, so to see a comment in there 2 years in a row, I went to Matt right after he took office and said, we need to at least look into it. Whether we do something or not, we at least have to go through the process of looking into it and figuring out what's right for Guilford. Right. So that's kind of where we are in the...
I did have some sentiment that it's a very clean and favorable audit report, and that obviously you can make a recommendation for improvement because there's always room for improvement. So it's good that you're taking a look at it, but we obviously have a favorable and clean audit.
Right. I did make it very clear at the department head meeting that it's really a procedural look, to how we're doing things and whether or not there are steps that we could do to improve our fraud risk. Not necessarily that we are looking for those holes that we're doing something wrong, but as Nicoletta noted through the audit, one of our responsibilities is internal controls. So finding ways that we could better manage how we take care of our assets is certainly would be better internal controls. And maybe they come in and we're doing pretty much the best we can do with the resources that we have, or maybe there are some ways that we can make improvements. But again, we're not in no way making any comment against any particular department. So we tried to make that very clear at the department head meeting, but just to give them a heads up so they're not hearing it from someone else other than us.
And we will continue to perform some level of analysis and report back out to you folks. It would be my anticipation that this would be a cooperative decision between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance based on the merits as presented.
The only thing I was going to ask, and the Board of Ed?
The Board of Ed would
But
certainly
would
be
she
included
report
in the entire process, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know. I mean, depending on whether you do, a couple of spot departments or you do the entire, the town and Board of Ed, there's a big cost differential, as you mentioned. So, just I'm sure they would be in the loop as well and be talked to about.
Right. The management letter is for the entire town of Guilford, not just any particular departments. And the Board of Ed would be part of that process.
Go ahead.
For the towns that have done it, how long was the process and how much staff time was involved?
I didn't get into that detail yet. I was just kind of seeking preliminary information, and once we have some more questions, I'll go back to those towns. Absolutely, we'll ask that.
Okay. Anything else on everything we've heard in item number 1 for the audit?
I have just one comment on the
Ken, go ahead.
CAFR. You indicated that it's not your area of the audit. On page 102, that it shows a reduction in headcount on the Board of Ed of 36 employees, which Linda is going to look into, because we all know that we did not have a headcount reduction of 36 in the Board of Ed. So Linda and Dr. Freeman are investigating.
Good. Okay. All right. Thank you very, very much. Nicoletta, Santo, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Shall we move on to item number 2?
Let's do that.
Public forum. No one in public forum. Unbelievable. Okay. Item number 3, approval of minutes of, 3.1, regular meeting minutes of December 18th, 2017.
I had a typo.
Go ahead, John.
Page 3,
Yep.
second paragraph. I think it should say possibly instead of possible. I think it's a typo.
Okay. I have a couple as well. Anybody else?
My
Ken, go ahead.
Editor skills are only that good.
Ken?
Page 4, there's a confusing statement. There must have been someone must have repeated the word annually incorrectly. You go to the bottom of page 4, Ms. Trudeau noticed that the biggest part of this is that they're being billed annually for the Munis software instead of annually.
That would be
Used to be
quarterly.
Such an annually would be quarterly.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. I have a couple. Going to page 5. A couple of items under revenues. First paragraph. Third sentence where it says because they did receive a substantial amount of advance tax payments this year. And the last sentence, same paragraph, revenues they did receive approximately $400,000. Page 6. Again, I guess it's just a typo, but third paragraph, Mr. Gammerman asked about a payment to Pullman and Comley. You know, that's their name, Pullman and Comley. And then finally, under medical benefits, where the acronym there is HAS, should be HSA. I have nothing further. Anyone else? So we have corrections. I should have moved first, but I didn't. So do I hear a motion to approve them as amended?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Item number 4, correspondence. Standing Building Committee minutes. Their meeting was actually going to hit on Tuesday, January 2nd. I'm sure they probably were not going to get a quorum the day after New Year's, so they held their meeting on January 9th. I was not able to attend that meeting due to a work conflict, but I do know they met, and they're usually, you know, with the holiday in there too, with yesterday being a holiday, I'm sure that there's going to be some delay on that. When I get them, usually I do get them, I will send them out to the Board of Finance. You might get them twice. You might get them from Tracy or Terry, and you might get them from me as well. So, but at least we'll get caught up, and then we should be back on a regular schedule with the Building Committee and get at least a draft version for next month. Pension Committee.
I guess I have a question, if I might.
Go ahead.
On page 3, I guess there was a discussion initiated by Ray Bauer, who asked if existing plans can be frozen and moved to a 401k plan. Is that the direct contribution plans that he's referring to? Could be possibly moved? It looks like Mitch suggested that that may be possible, but it may go against contractual, negotiated contractual terms. I was just curious if that's actually possible, or if we know.
It is possible to freeze a plan and no longer allow contributions, but we would need to negotiate that with each of our respective unions. There's also a couple other options. You can buy people out of their pension obligations, but I don't think we're in a cash position to do that. I think you're still getting reports on a monthly basis related to how many are participating in the traditional pension plan versus the contribution plan. But that would have to be negotiated.
And I would make the assumption that while they still remain employed, they would switch to DCP.
Yes.
Yes.
And then there are some requirements to that require, or don't require, but good faith suggests that those individuals had in anticipation of having a certain benefit at their retirement. So future contributions into the 401k on the part of the town are typically adjusted to make up for the difference between the rate of return they would have gotten under a traditional pension plan and the open-endedness of a 401k plan. Went through it 4 years ago at my former employer. And it's a difficult task, but it's one that can be done. But in this case, they imposed it on us because we didn't have a union. We were all at-will employees, so it's a little bit different with bargaining units.
Yes, sir. Okay. I had a question for Linda, actually. The notes on 5.2 said that you are, as business manager, are actively working on bringing the contribution up to the recommended funding level. Is there anything you care to explain or describe on that? What are they doing? Yeah.
Should I read that? Maybe we should read the whole paragraph.
It's in paragraph 5.
Yeah. Mr. Forbes additionally addressed the underfunding of the Board of Ed plan.
The underfunding of the Board of Ed.
Oh, okay, yes.
An additional $20,000 was applied after July 1st, 17 to the Board of Ed plan, which is not shown in this valuation. And then what Ken said.
Okay, so
the TO stated that this funding is an issue and that they're actively working on bringing up their contribution to the recommended funding.
right, so the recommended funding level is over $900,000. We currently, right now, the amount that stands in the budget is $500,000, which is more than the normal cost of the plan, which is about $413,000. So we're meeting the normal cost, but we're not anywhere near meeting the actuarially determined contribution. There has been some discussion by some of the Board of Education members about increasing the contribution in the budget, but as it stands right now, it's $500,000.
So there's nothing to report, no further progress.
Not until the Board of Ed finishes their budget deliberations.
Okay.
Go ahead.
To that question, comment, three plans, the public school employee pension plan is the least funded of the three major plans at 77.19% versus police retirement at 84.5%, and the town employees pension plan at 85.6%. So Board of Ed, my understanding, is aware and should be addressing it. I think it's reflected in the minutes that they made a contribution to surplus at the end of last fiscal year. That's a good faith effort on that behalf.
I think as a comment, I think we found that when we do fully fund the pensions, that over the long term, it really does benefit the town budget.
Yep.
Although it may be difficult to ramp up that payment quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of a sudden I heard a band playing. Actually, two things very quickly. I know that I saw in here that Greg Seaman, who's been a member of the pension committee, is basically retiring from that committee. I'm just wondering if there's been any replacement candidates that you know of stepping up, or has there been any?
Yes, there has been.
There have been?
Yes.
Good. Excellent.
None have been recommended to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, we
Right,
haven't-
no, I was just
we haven't
wondering if
seen them
there's been
yet.
any interest, because I know that's, I'll tell you, that's a tough committee. And I did, the investment report that we get. I tend to remember that, I mean, we get this, and of course it's helpful, but I tend to remember we used to get one that was more of a month-to-month that showed how we were doing.
I've got the
Over-
example here, too.
Okay.
I
The
keep- this question
cumulative.
came across my mind as well.
And
It's the same report, but just in a cumulative?
in a cumulative,
Oh.
yeah, that kind of shows over the trends over the last 12 months as
Right.
opposed to month to month.
We provide that as
Yeah.
backup to the pension minutes because that is what's reported at the pension commission.
Okay.
I think this report shows return as well, right?
I was just wondering when we started getting the monthly report versus the cumulative report. It was probably within the last year or two.
I'm sure
And
it's been since
I'm wondering if
me,
we
I
can-
don't know.
No, I'm just
I
wondering if
don't
we
know.
can maybe get that report, the cumulative report. I just found that more informative than the month to month.
Agreed.
Okay, I
Does
mean,
anybody have any comment on that, or get both? I think.
Well, like I said, that's what the pension committee reviews because they're looking from, on that monthly basis, that's what
Right.
they're looking at. But
Right.
if you have a copy of what you used to get, I'll
I do.
take a look. Sure.
All right. That'd be great. Thank you. All right. Okay, moving on. Item 5. Review and accept report of expenditures for the Board of Education for December 2017. Linda and Dr. Balistraci, come on down.
Good evening.
So, the expenditures for the month of December for the Board of Education were $4,527,034.44. Expenditures and encumbrances to the end of December were 44.11% of the budget as compared to 43.99% of the budget in the prior year. You'll note on this page that Mrs. Trudeau put together that in terms of particular categories, we're seeing salaries approximating this time last year. We're seeing slightly higher percentages of expenditures in employee benefits and in capital lines, and we're seeing lower percentages compared to last year at this time in purchase services, tuition, supplies and materials, and transportation. The Board of Ed went over these numbers and over the warrants in their operations committee and then approved these expenditures at their Board of Ed meeting.
Questions?
Would you like to start, Mr. Chairman?
No, why don't you start this now?
I have a question you probably told us a million times, but I'm just curious, how does this work when we collect revenue for pre-K tuition and this other item, tuition from Old Saybrook Public Schools?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm asking about how we collect this revenue for pre-K tuition and for tuition that we get, that we've gotten payments from the Old Saybrook Public School. Do you know how that works?
So the,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Either of us can answer it.
The Old Saybrook Public School is a student from Old Saybrook that is attending one of our special education programs.
Okay.
And we are charging tuition to Old Saybrook for them to attend our school. So we are in the outplaced facility for them. The pre-K program is the program that is at Guilford Lakes, and there's a charge for students to attend the pre-K program that are the non-special ed students that are part of the pre-K program. So we collect revenue from the parents to attend our pre-K preschool program.
Okay, I thought it worked somewhere along those lines, and I'm kind of thrilled that we're sort of in the business of providing special ed services when we ramped up our in-house capabilities. So,
And
it's
there are
good news.
times,
It
right,
offsets
and
the
there are
cost.
certainly times when some of our students are the recipients of such
Right.
a situation
Can
in
go the other way
other
around.
area,
Understood.
other area schools.
Anybody want to change up?
I'll throw a couple in there.
Okay.
Purchase services, professional technical services. Is it a timing issue right now? I think you put it on your. I circled it and then you did. I circled it and I put timing. So never mind. I answered.
It is a
You
timing
answered the
issue.
question. I wrote it down. Tuition. It's still trending high like last year, and we were over last year. Is it too early to tell if we're going to be similar to what we were last year, or in terms of how much we were over?
I apologize, I did not bring a copy of the tuition reports for everybody. I will email it out tomorrow.
It's fine.
In trying to get ready for budget meeting, I forgot this one. So right now, the current projection for tuition is that we are going to be about $170,000 over budget. A lot of that depends on what we actually end up receiving for the excess cost grant.
Right.
It only changed slightly from last month's report. We had an additional outplacement, and it's not a special ed outplacement, and a student is attending a magnet high school, and we got billed by the magnet high school. So I wasn't sure when we were going to get that bill, and we did receive it. So it was a $6,000 change really from last month. But I'll send out this tuition report to you in the morning, and if you have any questions on it at that time, you can email me
That's fine.
your questions.
Thank you.
And I do apologize again.
So you may have answered this one as I kind of return to the board here. I'm trying to see some of the things that are running over, but I had questions about the salaries for central office certified and central office non-certified. So it seems to be running a lot higher percentage-wise from the previous year, 50.98% expended this year compared to 19.11%.
Right. The actual expenditures year to date this year compared to last year are about the same. The difference was a change in the budgets. When the budget for the previous year was done, we had a couple positions in there that we have since eliminated. So we eliminated them at the start of the 16-17 school year. So when we did the budget for this year, the 17-18 year, we adjusted the budgets down. So it throws off those percentages, but the actual expenditures from this year to last year are the same.
Are we down on headcount for this year then?
Yes.
So interesting. Just a higher percentage, a higher dollar.
Right, so
I think this goes to what Chairman Ross said last time. It depends on what you're comparing to.
True.
You know, if the number's higher or lower, that
Right.
drastically can affect your percentage, and it looks different, but it's not that much different.
Question. On upkeep, just comparing this year to this year, on upkeep of building and grounds and site improvement, you've either spent or encumbered virtually all of the money in the budget. Can you explain that and suggest whether there is a possibility you're going to be needing more funds? They seem to be overlapping categories.
Which two, I'm sorry?
Upkeep, site improvement.
Site improvement and
And upkeep of building and grounds. Virtually both totally funded with with encumbered monies and actual
Right, so the
expenditure.
majority of the site improvement was for work that was done over the summer, mainly at Adams for relocating
There's
the
nothing
classrooms.
planned for the rest of the year.
Right.
Very little.
Right, so there's very
take
little
care.
projects that would be done
Okay, so
to the
that's
end of the year. So
that's
that's the site
explainable.
improvement. The upkeep in buildings and grounds, a lot of that is blanket purchase orders for things that are done during the year, testing, inspections, maintenance, things, ongoing things that have to be done during the year. As we get through the year, we start canceling some of the things that we won't be needing, or we just purchase orders based on actual costs. So a lot of these purchase orders are done well in advance on an estimate, and we revise it as we get closer.
Okay, so there's no anticipation of extra needs.
Oh, there's always extra needs when it comes to facilities. Just ask Mr. Gurnham that; he'll be happy to tell you.
I'm sure that's
millions
true, but
lined up.
I'm looking for some available funds to meet the unanticipated need.
We do not expect to be coming to
We do
you
not
to
expect.
But if it came to that, we all know, I mean, there would have to be some sort of consideration of an reallocation, and
Yeah.
there'd have to be cost savings somewhere else.
We had issues at Adams with freezing pipes and damage, and
Right.
so those were unanticipated expenses. We could put in an insurance claim, but we do have a deductible on our plan that we're going to have to pay up front. So, I mean, if that was worse than what it was, we probably would have had to come ask for something. I hope never to have to do it.
Maybe it's directed to Cliff. I was going to ask the question relative to the water issue at Adams and the heat issues at Baldwin. We have a state-of-the-art facility at the high school where we have the ability to control the heat and air remotely. Do we have that ability at some of these older schools currently?
Yes.
And if so, I guess I'm wondering how it happened that we have a freezing pipe when we all knew all the time that how cold it was going to get, that the buildings were closed because of the holiday and the break and stuff. Why we weren't.
So I'll try and explain this the best that I can, and to the best what I can remember. I was told when they renovated the Adams main office area, it created in the ceiling this gap, and it was an unheated, uninsulated space, and that's where the frozen pipe was. And it was only this renovation in this old building that created this situation that we really weren't aware of until it happened. They've gone through and checked other parts of the building. There's no other places like this. Well, there was one other area they found, but they've adjusted temperatures to allow for that to not happen in that area. They've checked other buildings and have not found the same similar gap between the ceiling and the actual roof line or whatever it was in this area.
So what's happened is that one of the fixes is to take some of the, to adjust some of the ceiling so that some of the heat from the building can get up there. But certainly one of the things that Cliff and his staff were doing all week and all weekend during those really cold temperatures is going around to buildings, making sure that they could check on things. This was not something we anticipated, but again, as Linda just said, when we did, and these renovations, if you remember, were done kind of in light of the Sandy Hook, doing security stuff, moving offices to the fronts of the buildings in places where they weren't, or making access and exits have to require people to go through the offices. This space above this new office setup, it was enclosed, obviously, but got very, very cold. So
they did adjust temperatures in the buildings so that where normally we drop the temperature at night when the building is unoccupied, they raised that so that the buildings would stay warmer all night long. They did other measures, just this one area was...
Sometimes, right,
yeah,
exactly.
no, that's right.
And sometimes
That's right.
you don't know until, unfortunately, it happens. And then what I find pretty funny is that on a lot of public facilities, you'll see ceiling tiles missing, and it's not because they broke or because...
That's exactly right.
They
They're
take
trying
ceiling
to
tiles out
get heat up.
there
They're trying to get
be able
heat up.
get the
That's
pipes
exactly
warm
right.
in the really
Yeah.
cold weather, and then they put it back in the summer to try to keep the AC. So, yeah, it was that cold. It's unfortunately with a cold snap like that, that would happen. But.
I think I have one more.
Sure.
Would you guys mind maybe making that a little bigger?
I can do it. It makes it, you could end up with legal size paper, or...
All right. Do your best. Do your best.
I'll do my
You
best.
Yeah, right.
Expand.
No,
There you go.
that's coming. You're right.
There you go.
Expand.
I'll use the magnifier.
Good point.
Thank you, though.
I can try
Blow it
adjusting
up.
the margins a little bit
All
more,
right.
but unless I eliminate columns, it really doesn't.
Page 7.
See, our budget's getting smaller.
I was just going to say anything on the warrants.
Page 7 on the warrant. I've not seen this before. Natchog Hospital, we have a tuition there for 1 month for $7,100. What kind of a...
Natchog Hospital has a psychiatric facility, so
I
that
see.
when we have students,
Oh, I see.
they get, any child that's hospitalized for any period of time gets an educational component. There are schools in psychiatric units.
I see. Okay.
I had a question about some of the mileage reimbursements, and I don't want to step on any privacy concerns, but some mileage reimbursements do show the name of the individual who's reimbursed. There's a couple that say the name's been removed, and I was
Yes.
wondering, what is the policy there? Why?
We have, there are times where we have children, who are in our special services, who need transportation, whose parents would prefer to be providing that transportation. And in order to protect the privacy of the children and the parents, their names are removed from the
Okay,
warrant.
understood.
They're not employees' names, it's just.
Right.
just the-
No, none of those are employees.
And then I saw quite a few charges for ambassador wheelchair service. Did they provide like special transportation if you're in a
Yes.
wheelchair? Okay.
Yes, they do some of the special education transportation.
Can we throw out the
Anything
crazy
else?
one now? I always have to pick a little one
All right,
one
pick
that's
one.
a little
All right,
interesting.
you get one crazy one. Go
The
ahead.
sensation station. I don't
What
know
page
what
are
I
you
don't know
on?
what it is, but it
What
sounds
page are you on?
sensational.
No.
So I couldn't figure out what it was. I'm sure it's. I always want to.
So
Always got to
again-
pick out an interesting
So
one.
again, we have, many students that we serve in-house who are special needs students and need various occupational therapy, physical therapy. So sensation is related to treatment interventions.
Okay. Kind of a neat name. I get it now.
Okay. Anything else for Linda or Dr. Tracy? Okay. If not, then I will ask for a motion to accept the report of expenditures of the Board of Education for December 2017 of $4,527,034.44.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Number 6, review and approve report of expenditures for town government for December 2017.
Hello.
Mary Jane.
Please bear with me as I cough my way through the entire meeting.
That time of year.
Hang in there.
So I'm going to use my iPad, although I do have all of my paperwork with me just in case.
You have backup to the technology. Smart move. Revenues?
Revenues come up first on the agenda here.
Okay.
Of course, our reports today are through the end of December, which is 50% through our fiscal year. Currently, town and state revenues are at 66.6%, up a little from 62.2% from last year. There are three that I'll point out before you ask questions. The first is the building department. We're seeing an influx of additional fees. Is a, what's that? Sorry.
Carry on. Carry on.
I was doing okay, now I stopped.
Veronica thinks she knows where they all are, so.
Both on the revenue and the expense side for the building department, you will see an additional amount being spent at this point in the fiscal year, because we have a large project that is bringing in additional fees, and those fees are covering the cost of a contractor to handle that work. So here on the revenue side, you're seeing 60% as opposed to 48% last year, and when we go through the expenses, you'll see that the expenses are a bit higher too, but it's an offset from the revenue. The police department is up significantly at this point. We are seeing a huge influx of work that Frontier and Eversource are doing. I've mentioned that a couple times. We're still seeing that trend. So it's all this special work that's being done and that we're billing for. So that's really what's showing that. And the third one I wanted to mention was the engineering and public works line, which looks like they're bringing in a significant amount more revenue this year. But I would just like to comment on last year's, that last year at this time was very low. So last year is in the anomaly instead of this year. So as we compare last year to this year, we're kind of on track this year to where we normally would be.
Actually, I thought one of them that you might mention is tax collection.
Yeah.
Well, I've mentioned tax collection a few times.
Usually it's only like a percent, or so. This is pretty substantial.
The Board of Selectmen this morning asked a question about tax collection and whether or not we received any additional funding revenue because of the change in the tax law. And I did go back and look at last December, and we are $4 million higher this year in this December as last year, which is making a significant bump. But on top of that, it's a significant advanced deposits that we received this year that have brought that up. But yeah, so it could be because of that. Although I would like to note that most of the inquiries we received about tax collection weren't to pay January's taxes in December. People wanted to pay next July's. They wanted to get all of next year's tax in this year, which is something we are not allowed to do. So, many people now pay their taxes in December instead of January, depending on how they do their taxes. So we are seeing an increase because of that, but it really was the 2019 fiscal year taxes that people were asking about, which we weren't allowed to receive.
Okay. Questions on revenue?
Yeah, the fire department, I know there's a 1 month lag with fire, but it looks low.
I would have to check with the fire chief.
That's the ambulance revenue.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, typically it runs a month behind, and eventually we catch up. But I can certainly inquire about that to see if
it's
there's
a good thing. It means there are not as many ambulances.
True.
Mary Jane, I've got to ask about the state.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to send us some checks soon?
Oh, absolutely. We have been receiving money from the state. We did receive our first quarter of the ECS. If you look at the report in front of you, it shows 31%, but we did receive 25% of what the state finally told us they would give us. This is going to be the year that, 5 and 10 years from now, people are going back and say, who the heck put this budget together? Because it's so, many of the items are so off. So we did receive 25% of what we anticipate from ECS. We are seeing some of our other state revenue coming in as well. So
it was the other revenue that I was concerned about.
Correct. There's significant. If you remember, I think last month I reported that overall our revenue is going to show a deficit about $180,000. So although we're seeing the ECS money is coming in higher than we budgeted, many of our other revenues are coming in lower than we're budgeted. So we really have to look at that whole area as a whole as compared to individually. So you can see. We're at 28% with the other state revenue and 31% with, the Board of Ed. So the numbers are backwards than what we normally have. But for what we are expecting to receive at this time, I have all of it. So we've received everything I'm expecting to receive as of December 31st.
Okay. And still that far a difference between what we received from the previous year, percentage-wise, for the other state income?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yep. There was a we have one particular line item that we had budgeted over $600,000, which they cut. So that's one big nut right off the top.
Was that the house rental?
No.
No. Okay.
No. The rental fees they actually took out of the ECS grant, which I guess they had the authority to take it from wherever they wanted, and obviously taking it from ECS gave them the ability to find money at every municipality. If they took something else, maybe there wouldn't have been enough. So by hitting ECS, at least they knew they were going to get their money back.
What was the $600,000 one that was canceled? Do you recall?
It was a municipal grant, revenue sharing. Yeah, there's like 4 iterations of this municipal revenue sharing grant that change depending on what budget is before us at this time. So we now have a hold harmless grant or some other grant instead of that. But again, we went off the best information we had at the time. Luckily, we're only expected to lose about $180,000. Could have been a lot worse, but so I do look at the state budget as a whole at this point.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Expenditures? Whenever you're ready.
Sorry. I'm trying to hold it in. So it's similar on the expenditure side. We are, again, 50% through the year, and we're right on target, 50.4% expended, slightly higher than last year's 49%. Here you'll see under the building department, the contracted services is over budget, that particular line item, and that's because of the revenue that's coming in on the other side. So if you look at the detail behind the summary report, you'll see that. But that is being covered, and we were aware that this was going to happen. We just didn't have it in time we didn't know about it during the budget season last year. But.
What about the 68% on debt retirement?
On the interest.
Principal on debt retirement.
Yeah, looks like the principal we have spent, we have paid all the principal out at this point. It's the interest. We have some interest payments that are due in the first half of the year and some that aren't due until the second half of the year. So it's just when they come due, correct.
All right. Anything else? Megan, go ahead.
So this is on page, it's under fire, under the itemized list of fire. The overtime seems to be trending pretty high. Is that typical?
I did speak to the fire chief today. It is used for people who are out on workers' comp, out sick. So it really fluctuates from year to year, depending on when those issues arise. And typically when that happens, we will see some slight savings in the full-time salary line. So overall, by the end of the year, we expect that to balance out. But depending on when those things happen, that's when we're spending them. So
budget workshops over the next couple of days, I think it's important to dig into, for those who are new on the board, and Jonathan, maybe as a refresher course, the explanation of the use of replacement salaries versus overtime. And both departments, police and fire department, will give you a full rundown on when we use each of those categories.
They'll be descriptive.
Yeah. They're prepared. The question gets asked
Every year.
so.
They can recite it now. Yeah, that's a good point that they do that. Because it can be complicated. Anything else on the expenditure sheets?
Anything here?
Warrants. Did I?
Sounds like that in the office.
Yeah, all of our offices.
I woke up this morning and said, I can't be sick these days, I got meetings all
Yep.
day long.
Just keep going.
So there, there's a warrant report, but then there isn't weekly or special.
They were,
Weekly.
they were sent separately?
They were in the mail, we got them today.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
All right, well, as long as I didn't think I was the only
No,
one, okay.
but if you open up your iPad,
It's in there.
Some haven't been.
Don't, I'm bringing it next time, just for this,
open up
for
your
that
iPad,
exact
you should see
reason.
them. Yeah. My
Okay.
staff was putting together the budget books, by the way, which are in that
Thank you.
box up there, and it was either get the budget books done or get those out a day late, so
And
I
uploading
had to
everything
make
to the.
make a judgment call for the use of my staff time, so that
So
they
the
did
first,
well.
the first item on the special warrant list, which I don't have in front of me, but I saw it online earlier, was I think it was $154,000 for the Long Hill Road project. And we talked about that. You have something for me?
I do, I was going to do my list
Okay,
then.
great. So then I won't even ask, so
Okay.
if you can.
Next.
I'll wait for you to enlighten me on where we stand with that.
The second item, the second item.
It was the second item?
The first item just has road repair for $156,000. The second item is Long Hill Road, $132,000.
What's the first item? I thought that was Long Hill Road.
Northern Heights.
Oh, yeah, what is Northern Heights, by the way?
Development in North Guilford.
Where?
You actually have to get, you have to
You
go
have to
through
go to Durham to get into.
Oh, is that the one around on the
Yeah.
backside there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I could tell you how to get to it.
Yeah, and you gotta go up when you hit
Maybe that's why we're paving
What's
it.
the road where, on the way to Middletown, the merge up there, you come back.
back, yeah.
1777.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's right across from Windler Farm, you have to go up that.
Yeah.
Horse country.
Go ahead.
While we're on special funds, about $2,000 for music theater intern, pre-performances materials.
Looking over your shoulder, I apologize because I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
but it says SDE, it's a part of
SDE
it, it's an
enhancement.
enhancement grant, so.
That's
Is that a
that's
grant?
Youth and Family Services. Oh, so they would have hired someone to put on a
They do what
They-
they squad
yeah.
with the kids.
Oh, it's,
Put on a
It's
performance.
It's usually like an MSW
Right.
intern.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And it's paid for through a grant, which is why you see it here.
Can we go back to Northern Heights 1 second? There was talk a year or two ago about connecting Blue Hill Drive with that community through the woods there into that Northern Heights. Is that what's going on, or is this repaving of that area up there?
Paving that
It's just
area, my
repaving.
understanding, but I can't speak definitively to that.
Because I know there were a lot of people that were not enamored with the idea
Yeah,
of
cutting
putting
the road through.
the road through and having that be a
I
throughway.
don't believe we cut the road.
Nothing's been approved since I've been here. I won't speak for before that, but.
We'll confirm that, Ken, but I think it's just repaving.
Anything else on any warrants?
Yeah, I have two.
Go ahead, Ken.
On the general warrant, I see that we have provided a Seeger, an insurance consultant with a $5,000 consulting fee. Can you tell us what that was?
We have HD Sevier. They're our consultant that works with us on all of our insurance requirements. Specifically, anything that we deal with KERMA, they're kind of like our eyes and ears for us to be sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck and the best service we can for KERMA. I'm not sure how long the town has had that relationship, but I believe it's been some time.
Is this an annual consulting
Correct,
fee?
yes.
I see. And there's no time period specified, but the golf course cost us $8,500 in water. Was that for what time period?
I've had that question before, and I know I've answered it. It was one of the good...
Well, there's some golf course questions that remain unanswered. I think,
I remember that was one of the ones I answered in an email.
I
want to
if
say...
I didn't ask a question about
I think the timing, if you look at the one you're referring to, Ken, I don't have it in front of me, but I do think it's not a wintertime water bill. I do think it's in the fall.
I'm sure it is, but
if you look at the dates.
What page?
What period
What
it
page is-
covered? Was it
what page is that?
1 month, 1 quarter? What was it?
I thought it said it there.
No, just one day.
Bills on a quarterly basis.
Oh, so it's a quarterly bill.
Page 1.
Kidding.
I'm assuming they traditionally bill on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
And judging from the invoice number, it looks like it was billed in November, which would probably mean it was the August, September, and October time frame.
Here it is, this right here.
It's right above, two above Seeger.
2 above
Connecticut
Seager.
Water Company, golf, and then it says water.
Water, and the numbers are fairly, the check number is a high number. So. I don't
That's
know.
on page 1? A different page 1 than me.
One on the week, page 1 on the weekly warrants.
Weekly warrant. yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, did you hear me say,
It's the weekly
Sorry.
warrant, the ones that,
not the special?
on that shaded list that exceeds $1,000.
I'm sorry. I thought
It's
we were...
the,
I got it.
you got it? You found it, okay.
Yeah, I could double check for you the time period. It's typically quarterly, I believe, but we can
Invoiced in
double check.
November, I see that now.
Yeah,
Invoiced November 21.
yeah, so it was probably August, September, and October's service.
Okay.
And it was very warm then, so they probably did have to do.
I can easily find that
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay,
Let
sure.
let you know.
Anything else
I
on
see
warrants?
I see something here that I don't understand, but in Public Works, page 35,
Okay, yeah, hold on.
Brasil and Daughters, Inc., $4,750 to grade and pave area breakstone books.
That was an expense that the town had agreed to absorb when the septic was redone behind Cilantro and...
Oh, that parking lot?
The parking thing.
Is that Gil Lombard's building?
No, this was actually the Wallace's building, I think. I think it's
So
their
maybe they made
septic
break
system.
water books?
No relation.
Wait, let me back up. There were, no relation. When the new parking lot was constructed,
Yes.
they determined that there was runoff from that parking lot into the parking area behind Cilantro's. And when they went to, and it was obviously, it was a situation that was created by that project. The town agreed to provide some remediation. The remediation was in form of the paving of that surface after the proprietors replaced their septic system. So that was our portion of the remediation caused by the runoff from the new parking area.
Shall we move on to medical benefits? Up from November, but still under the budget amount. So,
Right, the December claims includes a portion held over from November because Anthem negotiated their contract with the Hartford Health System. And so any bills from the October-November area were held up, but that was completed and everything was paid in December, which is why November is low and December is back up, but still under where we anticipate to be for the month. And so if that $908,000 included some of November, you can maybe say it was about 800, 800 in November, 800. I don't believe we have a significant amount of our employees that use the Hartford health system. Obviously we do, but more significantly down here in Yale, so we weren't affected as much as some other communities. But we are still seeing the effect of the HSA for the Board of Ed. The town has recently negotiated a couple of their contracts, and as of July 1, some of our employees will be on an HSA as well, for what we hope to be some even more additional savings in our medical fund. So our admin fees remain pretty steady. Our catastrophic claims are reported through November. We're always a month behind with our reporting on that, unfortunately. But we have total claims of just over $1 million, and the ISL has covered $233,000 so far for us. On the revenue side, very stable. On the revenue side, the town and the Board of Ed obviously puts in their amount each month, and the other is employees and some retirees that are on our insurance. That's where that money comes from. So we're anticipating we're up to a $3.9 million surplus, helped in fact by the savings in the HSA. I did.
I'd like to get the chairman's attention when you're done.
Okay.
Go ahead, finish.
I was just saying, I did mention at the selectmen's meeting this morning that it would be my recommendation for the two boards to at least consider possibly the use of some of this funds for, to mitigate increases in our healthcare, because even though we go to the HSA, we still continually have increases. So, it might be a time that we could, look at that through the budget season. We do like to keep at least 2 months, no less than 2 months of expenses in the fund. It's just a general rule. But possibly because the fund is growing, it might be a time to look at some of those things.
When there's a surplus, does the BOE get their kind of chunk of it?
We share the fund on a percentage basis based on the number of contracts that we have.
Might be useful to maybe shore up some pension contributions.
So. Yep. Matt, go ahead.
Mary Jane stole a little bit of my thunder on that. That's quite all right. At the Board of Selectmen meetings, we did socialize the issue of utilizing some of those funds. And I would respectfully request that this board seriously consider the use of some of those funds to mitigate some potential one-time events. Jonathan's suggestion relative to the Board of Education is certainly prudent. Another is, I think you've been presented with the opportunity to fund the replacement for the high school turf field. And there are some items like that which are significant one-time events that don't occur on an annualized basis that may very well be best suited to be funded through taxpayer money that is sitting on the sidelines in the form of undesignated, well, in this case it's a designated fund, but monies that are there that could be utilized. So I would respectfully request that you strongly consider the establishment or the use of some of those funds and move those to either a special designated fund or to accommodate capital requests.
Timing seemed to make sense because our unassigned fund is fairly well funded at about 9%.
Right. And what you heard tonight was basically what, $1.2 million, $1.15 million increase to our undesignated fund balance. I will be coming to you with some suggestions on the establishment of some special funds to address some areas in town that I think warrant the application of the special funds. To keep pace with our current contribution level related to our overall budget, we need to allocate about $250,000, maybe $300,000 of that $1.15 million to the undesignated. So that needs to keep pace with the increase in our operating budget on an annualized basis. So that leaves us with some pretty significant amount of funds just generated from the 2016-2017 budget for which you just received the audit. And I think that presents us with some terrific opportunities to do some things in a little different manner than we've done in the past.
Agreed. Yeah.
A couple of comments on this. The RSL premium, as we all know, went up by 50%. I think it roughly went to $800,000. It's $1.3 million now. And at our current rate, we're not going to be utilizing that. We've only have 230, we're halfway through the year, and $233,000 is covered. So I would suggest going forward that we consider either self-insuring or increasing the caps. Right now, everything over 150 falls into that. But that, and also if you look at, we're also getting squeezed on the admin side. If you look at the admin cost of claims, they're basically projected to be identical. And we've got 20% more in admin. So it looks like the admin cost has gone up by 20% on top of a 50% increase in the premium. So
yeah,
I think we should be looking at.
Right. What I think we need to, I agree with you. It makes sense to take a look at it, but what I think we need to do also is take a look at a rolling three-year average based on where we were. 1 year does not make a trend.
Agreed.
And to your latter point, we had the insurance folks in. The days run together these days a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking exactly about that. They're negotiating on our behalf with Anthem. And they are objecting to some of the fee structure increases, particularly on the admin side. And there was one other.
But there was I don't remember exactly what it was. There was something where they would take away the fee and put it in another area, and it sounded really good on paper. But Milliman thought long term, it was like using your fund balance on one time and then, moving forward. So we're looking at, I did ask them to review the fees and to give us a clear understanding of how those fees are derived. So I haven't heard back from them.
So catastrophic claims, though, that's fairly difficult territory to predict, right? So.
Yeah, I think
it went up significant. They are anticipating having that go up again this coming year. So
and we talked about reviewing that with the insurance with Millman as well.
Right. So the budget that you'll see in the book does include an increase in that, but you'll hear us say in the budget presentations we're still meeting with Millman and Anthem and reviewing those claims.
Right.
Probably heard the same thing from the Board of Ed side because we're kind of working on that together, so we're hoping to bring some of those down, but we've provided the detail that we've been given at the moment.
As part of that analysis, Mary Jane and I, more likely Mary Jane, will pull together the history over the last 5 years related to our stop-loss insurance and what kind of performance we've seen relative to the cost. Does that make sense?
Easy enough. We have this data from each year.
It does look like it's not trending our way this year, though.
What's that?
It does look like the stop loss isn't really trending to our benefit this year.
But we're the interesting part about that is you're 2 or 3 cancer cases away from it changing dramatically.
They're good. Yeah, exactly.
I'd rather be adjusted than have the cancer cases, but right. If the medical need is there, then it may end up.
Well, we don't know. What is not here is there is not, and we can get this information.
Right.
How many claims are approaching it? And obviously we can't disclose who they are, et cetera. But if we have several claims that are approaching that number, which is something we've looked at in the past, this could change dramatically within the next couple of months. But Ken, you're absolutely right. It warrants a look.
We wouldn't have agreed to such a large increase last year had we not trended that way.
It wasn't being ultra conservative.
Correct.
Based on numbers and data.
Correct. Right, Linda? No. Linda can back me up here. She's we go to all the meetings together, so.
I have a little question about the revenue from the employee contributions. We seem to be having a little bit of extra. Is that because new employees coming on board, or?
Well, we really estimate that number based on what we have today. We have a lot of changes in that number. People get married, they have children, they decide to take the waiver instead. It really fluctuates. Somebody could go out on retirement, and that adds to it.
Contributions change.
The fact that it's relatively stable. The fluctuation isn't so great that it's I'm questioning it at the moment.
Yep.
And sometimes there's five pay periods in a month, and sometimes there's 4. So because we get paid on a weekly basis, so some months would have 5 weeks of revenue,
yes.
And some would have 4. So we see those fluctuations as we go along.
Enlightening. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on from that, I'll just building permits and the capital project reports. With the amount of data and everything that we're getting, I really didn't look at this as much as I like to. If something had to go, it was the capital reports. I'm sorry if you.
We've had 24 hours worth of meetings today, it feels like.
Yeah.
So we know how that is.
But it's definitely coming along, and I think that, unless anyone has any questions, we could focus on this a little bit more next month.
I had promised it on a quarterly basis, so I did it again for December, and would anticipate having that
You're doing
each
these
quarter.
on a quarterly basis.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. Good.
It can sit for another month.
I think so.
I know.
Just bring these with you next time.
Nothing
next
dramatic.
They're on your iPad if you go back to this one.
The iPad, again the iPad.
Going to be hearing that a lot, aren't we? Okay. All right, before we move to the next agenda item, we're going to do the approval now. So, is there anything else for Mary Jane?
No.
Okay. Do you hear a motion to approve the report of expenditures for town government for December 2017? I got to say the amount first. For $2,390,584.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Recusals? All right.
Mr. Chairman, before we move forward, can we talk Long Hill Road, or would you like to wait and do that after the completion of my reports?
Let's do it under old business. Can we do it under old business, just to get these out of the way?
Works for me.
Because I know I'm looking at Mike, and we're going to be getting close to the 2-hour point soon. So,
I have a heads up.
15 minutes. All right. Well, let's get Veronica out of here then.
Let's wrap this up.
You can recuse yourself from the rest.
I haven't either.
All right. Well, we're halfway through the agenda. That's the good
I'm the
news.
sick one.
I know, really. All right. So, so we can hit these fairly.
I'm sorry, I sat in the furthest chair away from you.
All right, so item number 7, set interest rate for Guilford Supplementary Tax Relief Program. Actually, Mary Jane, it's good that you're up here anyway. So I'll just read the memo that we received dated January 8th from our finance director. Guilford Supplementary Tax Relief Plan requires that the Board of Finance set the interest rate annually for those deferring their taxes. It is my recommendation that the rate of 2.47% be used for the fiscal year 2018-19. This rate represents the current 20-year spot yield for AAA-rated general obligation municipal bonds as reported by Municipal Market Data, which is a subsidiary of Thomson Reuters. So, do I hear a motion to set the interest rate for the Guilford Supplementary Tax Relief Program at 2.47% for fiscal year 18-19?
Just entertain maybe one question.
Let's put in a motion.
Question
So moved.
to a motion?
Motion.
Oh.
I'm just doing the officialities.
Discussion. Second.
All right, second. Now you can discuss all you want.
So I'm just curious about the interest rate. Recollection from the last time I served on the board was that we just tried to pass the town's rate of borrowing to the program. But this is kind of stating a spot rate.
This is
Just
how it's
wondering
been
if it's
done from before me.
Okay.
So I was just following the same.
All right, so maybe it hasn't changed. Just my imagination.
Yeah, I've been using the same formula
Okay.
from our
I wonder if
from
the
our
language
financial-
was that it just kind of reflects our borrowing rate.
I believe that's the intent.
Okay. Okay, anyway, it's a good rate, and it's going to benefit a lot of people with the program to have such a low rate.
What's the total dollar value of the program?
Right now,
Yeah, roughly.
the benefits paid out?
No, it's really small. The amount that, it's 2.47% rate that we're charging. On how much money are we talking about? It's not a lot of money.
It's $986,767.
Well, that's
It's
So-
net.
Right, it's right. See, the change you made, it just doesn't, it's rounding error, it doesn't round. You can get a 3%, it just doesn't. So,
With that being said, all in favor?
aye.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'm in favor, sorry.
Okay.
You went so quickly.
Sorry. All right, number 8, set cap for aggregate benefit under Section E2 of the Elderly Tax Relief Program Ordinance. So as part of the same memo, pursuant to Section 247-27A of the Elderly Tax Relief Program Ordinance, the aggregate benefit should not be set at less than 0.5% of the fiscal year 17-18 total budget of $95,188,169 or $475,941. In order to avoid prorating the benefits of those approved for the program, the Board of Finance has raised the cap to cover the full amount of benefits approved. As shown in the table below, we see the table below.
In this past year, it was brought down because
Right.
of the trend, so I recommended that we leave it at that cap.
I was concerned at first when I saw this, but then when I saw how the benefits had basically stayed the same, the number of applicants has fluctuated by, 7? There hasn't really been much movement over 4 years. So, although we're close, we're not so close that I think we need to raise it. So that's just my opinion based on what you said, so I would agree.
Yeah, it's entirely your decision, so.
Okay.
I don't think we need to take any action, do we? Or do we have to
Yeah.
vote to keep it the same?
You have to set
We gotta
that
set the
cap.
Now we still have to set it?
Yeah, so with that, do I hear a motion to set the cap for the aggregate benefit under Section E2 of the Elderly Tax Relief Program Ordinance at $1,100,000?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion further? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm
Opposed?
going to abstain.
We abstain.
Yeah, I've always felt this program has an Achilles heel and that it needs an asset test, but I do like the program otherwise.
Okay.
It's a good program.
I added 8A. So, at its meeting held January 16, 2018, that'd be this morning, the Board of Selectmen took the following action. Voted unanimously to award RFP number 1-1718, heavy rescue vehicle to Marion Body Works of Marion, Wisconsin, in the amount of $954,973. Pursuant to the language of the $1.45 million bond resolution approved on April 4th, 2017, the Board of Finance must make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen in order to expend funds and/or contract for services based on approved authorization of the 2-year funding of the town's 5-year capital plan. Do I hear a motion to approve
Motion to approve.
this RFP in the amount of $954,973? Motion.
Oh, we're going to.
Second for decision.
Then we're going to have discussion?
Second discussion, yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to second for
Sure.
discussion? Second discussion.
Now we can have discussion?
I'm trying, yeah, so
We're going
Robert's
by the
rules
book
thing.
tonight.
I'm trying to go by the book tonight, so.
I just want to confirm that the language of the bond resolution that was approved on April 4th of 2017 stated that the funds were to be used for this purpose. I don't recollect that bond resolution or
Yes.
referendum. So,
Yes.
okay.
Specific for that fire
Okay.
truck, or for a fire truck.
And usually the question does come up, what was the anticipated budget for that particular piece of equipment?
It was
$1
1
million.
point, yeah, it was 1 million,
$1 million.
right? So we're gonna have 47,
It was in-
45 million, 45,000 underneath that.
Good.
So the number came in relatively close.
How many proposals did we receive?
Don't know.
Okay.
We can find
Several
out.
of them?
There's only a couple of manufacturers. I'd say
Well, how many-
several would be a
How many people
stretch.
make fire engines?
Yeah.
Pearson?
But it was a little bit. So I think there were at least 3, I believe. And I asked, of course, asked the question that, are they comfortable with the low bidder? Because municipal RFPs require a lowest responsible bidder. And they said yes, they felt they were responsible and it met their criteria.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so let's see. For number 9, we have committee reports. I did want to mention that the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance met this evening. Board of Ed operations and we as a board, which actually was both boards in totality. I think everyone was there from both boards to talk about the upcoming budget. Ken, I don't know if you want to say anything regarding it, but I guess we'll just put it out there that we do have our books. We've been reading it. We were talking about the fact that the Board of Ed superintendent's budget has come in at 2.59% increase. And there were several issues that actually my notes are somewhere in here, and there's a couple of key line items that are really 1% of that, basically 2.5% or 2.6% increase.
The bus contract that's coming up is a big factor.
Yeah, and
the
basically
new hires,
half the synthetic turf field at the stadium field, the original field. I think it's safe to say that we hit every aspect of the budget tonight. We talked about capital, we talked in salaries, we went to benefits, we went across all of them, all the categories.
As well as the audit.
As well as the audit. And we had a really good discussion with the Board of Ed. So I think as a starting point, we all agree that, or at least the Board of Ed agrees, it's a reasonable starting point. And as Chairman Bloss mentioned, it will no doubt be different.
It'll be paired somewhat. They're going through their own
right
review process, and then they'll be submitting to us when, in February?
Yeah, I'll mention that. Our presentation in our regular meeting in February. So, did anybody have anything else to add regarding that meeting?
I was taken back that the chairman of the Board of Education had mentioned his concern about trying to even out the capital flows with some of the capital projects. So I'm hoping that that's really going to help the town if we can kind of figure out how to keep capital spending in check while we go through the next few years with heavy debt from the high school, but then some of the debt will open up as we get past this kind of wave of debt that's come from the high school funding.
From what I saw, I think initially there's been a really good job in that, in trying to even it out. But we'll have to see what the Board of Ed decides to move forward with. But it's pretty.
I would be interested in our first selectman's opinion about who might own the turf field, and maybe whether it's a town project or a school project.
I think it was presupposed that when we installed it, that it was a joint decision between the town and the Board of Ed, and that responsibility for replacement when it came time for it would be joint responsibility between the two entities. That's my recollection of the discussion at the time that we moved the project forward.
Okay. And I think, as I had mentioned during that meeting, regardless of whether it's the Board of Ed and the town splitting it or going one side or the other, it's still going to hit the budget, and it's hitting everybody. It's not just one or the other. So,
I think that, if I'm not mistaken, at the Park and Rec's presentation of their capital budget project, that was an item that had been identified as for consideration in this year's capital budget on the town zone.
Right.
So I think that's consistent with
both sides are consistent. Yeah.
I think we touched a little also as well as what is our kind of expectation for useful life for the turf fields. So I think someone mentioned that we might be at about a 9 or 10 year point with the one we're considering replacing.
10 years. My son's out of high school 6, and he played all 4 years on it, so it's got at least 10 years.
There you go.
The anticipation at the time, I believe, was a 10-year useful life.
That's correct, because I was on the Board of Selectmen at the time. Yeah.
Okay. Old business. Why don't we? Well, come on back up.
I forgot she was on the sidelines.
I didn't want
want to be part of the board
Well,
discussion?
I did say old business, so, and there was nothing else on committee reports, so I think we're good.
Thank you.
Pass these around, please.
Mike, just because I'm cognizant of time, how are we doing?
About 1 minute.
Yeah.
I'll go fast.
You want to change it?
This is the report.
Yeah.
Motion to
Yeah,
adjourn.
why don't, you know what, seriously, because we're going to have a little bit more too. Why don't we change it and just, thank you. Or we could cut you off mid-sentence like Joe, right?
We're very close. We almost did it.